Good morning, everyone. And for this video lecture, we're going to talk about Gabriela Mistral and one of her works, a poetry called Tiny Feet. So, I'm going to be dividing this video lecture into three. The first part would be talking about a little bit about Gabriela Mistral, what are the things that we should remember about her, and the things that we should put into consideration when we interpret her poetry Tiny Feet. The second part would be about imagery. What is imagery in general? And then I'm going to be asking you to identify the different imagery that we can find in Tiny Feet. And then the third part would include two things. The first one would be about symbolism, and the second one would be like the last part of this whole presentation. The interpretation of this poetry would be coming after that. So it's either I'm going to be uploading another video, or we're going to talk about it in class. But definitely, all of these things we're going to talk about in the context of Tiny Feet. Now, I would assume that every one of you have already read Tiny Feet because it's a very short, poetry. And unlike sonnet, it doesn't follow a particular structure, and it doesn't have a particular rhyming pattern. So it's not that very strict. But let me just tell you that, or remind you that this is a translation from the original poetry that was written in Spanish. So most probably when it was translated, the rhyming pattern, the meter, and all these things might have been disregarded to, really translate it to English in a way that it wouldn't lose its essence. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So, Tiny Feet. Okay. Tiny feet. A child's tiny feet, blue, blue with cold. How can they see and not protect you? Oh my God. Tiny wooden feet, bruised all over by pebbles, abused by snow and soil. Man, being blind, ignores that where you step, you leave a blossom of bright light, that where you have placed your bleeding little souls, a redolent tuberose grows. Since, however, you walk through the streets so straight, you are courageous without fault. Child's tiny feet, two suffering little gems, how can the people pass unseeing? Okay, so before we go on interpreting that, of course, we go the usual way. We first talk about its poet, Gabriela Mistral. Well, Gabriela Mistral, because I again assume that you have accessed the pages that I have uploaded on Schoolbook last Friday or last time, you would know by now that Gabriela Mistral was her pen name, and her real name was just a very short name, Lucila de Maria del Perpetuo Socorro Godoy y Alcayaga. But the shorter version of that is Lucila Socorro Godoy, or Lucila Godoy y Alcayaga sometimes. But she would prefer to be called Gabriela Mistral. Gabriela Mistral, the name, actually came from two of her favorite authors, which we will discuss later. So some basic information about Gabriela Mistral. She was born in April 1889, and she died on January 10, 1957. She was born in Vicuña, Chile, because this piece represents the Latin America. Chile is part of the Latin America, and her parents were Juan Jerónimo Godoy Villanueva, and her mother was Petronila Alcayaga. They were a poor family. In fact, Gabriela Mistral didn't finish college. But something good about her, there's something good about her persistence and her passion in literature and teaching really made a huge impact in her life. Not only in her life, but among different people within and outside Chile. Later on, we'll find that out. Gabriela Mistral is known as a Chilean poet. She was also known as an educator because she actually died as a professor. She retired as a professor. But take note that she did not finish college education. Okay, so how was she able to do that? We'll find out later on. But I also assume that you have again read how she was able to achieve or how she was able to become a professor even without you know finishing college. Aside from that, she was also known as a diplomat and a feminist. She was a very well-known feminist. In fact, most of her works are feminist in nature. And she was the first ever Latin American woman to win the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1945. Most of her work dealt with love in general, but not so much on romantic love, but specifically about mother's love, love for a child, which is kind of interesting because Gabriela Mistral herself did not become a mother, but she had this like overflowing love for a child that she wasn't able to have. So it was interpreted as love for children in general, and that was reflected in most of her works. And aside from that, she also expressed very painful, very sorrowful memories and recovery. And some of these, critics say, are from her personal personal stories, personal experiences, which is not bad, because as literary persons, you don't only talk about others' story, but most of the time it's more on a personal level for you. Um, these are some important dates in Gabriela Mistral's life, especially when she was just beginning her career. In 1904 rather, um, that was the year when she started working on her poetry. Um, that was 1904, and then 2 years after that, she met the love of her life, Romeo Oreta. In some references, Romeo is Romelio, but whichever name it is, it's referring to the same person, the love of her life, Gabriela Mistral's love of her life. He was a railroad worker, and she was, I think, by that time, Gabriela Mistral was already working as a teacher aide. 1906, they met, they fell in love, but 1909, it had an abrupt, it stopped abruptly because of Romeo's death. And Romeo committed suicide. And somehow that really made a huge impact on Gabriela Mistral's life because she did not get married after that. Okay, which is very, very interesting. Okay. This was what I was telling you about. This is what I was telling you about. That Gabriela Mistral's name was actually, pen name rather, was actually gotten from two of her most favorite writers, Gabriel de Annunzio, who was an Italian writer, and Frédéric Mistral, who was a French writer. So she somehow combined these two names and she got Gabriela Mistral, but she's not in any way related to these two guys. Okay. So, going back to her writing career, her first ever recognition, writing recognition, was in 1912 when she uh, published her compilation of essays called Desolación. Desolación is a compilation of essays about women, about their struggles, about their rights, and all of those things. And a year after that, she um, she also, what do you call this? She also published another book, another compilation, Lecturas para Mujeres, or Readings for Women. So, as the title suggests, this talks about everything about women. She loved talking about women. She loved discussing women's rights, women's struggles, women's love, okay? All those things. Basically, they talk about motherhood, childhood education, and something about nationalism. Okay, yes. So, remember, in 1909, she lost the love of her life, Romeo Oreta. 1943 was also a very sad, very sorrowful year for Gabriela Mistral. It was on August 14, 1943, that she lost her favorite nephew, Miguel, to suicide as well. I don't know what's with suicide and Gabriela Mistral, but unfortunately, it's a very unfortunate thing that she kept on losing important people on suicide. And definitely, this again created huge impact on her personally and career-wise, because somehow it forced, or it encouraged her, the sorrow and the pain that she felt encouraged her to write more about women, write more about children. In November 15 of 1945, she became the very first Latin American woman to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature. And in 1947, 2 years after that, she received Doctor Honoris Causa from Mills College in Oakland, California. What does Doctor Honoris Causa mean? It means that it is an honorary degree, an honorary doctorate degree awarded to somebody who, even though they did not finish college or master's, were able to practice the principles of a particular field of study. In the case of Gabriela Mistral, it's the field of literature and writing. And therefore, this explains the fact that even though she did not finish college, she died and she became a very well-known professor, doctor actually, because of this. And in 1951, finally her own country recognized her and gave her the National Literature Prize in Chile. Okay. What is so important about Gabriela Mistral is that she was a very serious writer. She was actually an activist. When she died, in her epitaph, this was written on her epitaph. What the soul is to the body, so is the artist to its people. She's not like other writers who would merely talk about love, romantic love, very superficial topics, very shallow topics. But for her, she recognized her responsibility as a writer to the people. She wanted to awaken the social responsibility of the people around her. And as a poet, she believed that it was her job to do that. So she was not writing for her own. just to merely express her opinion, her emotion, but for her, it's more of an activism. She wanted people to realize something or at least be aware about something through her work. Needless to mention, her countless essays and, of course, her poetry were also aimed at something else. Social change, social revolution, social activism. That's what she was after. And in that case, that made Gabriela Mistral a very relevant artist, not only during her time, but even in modern time. That's Gabriela Mistral. So next time, we'll be talking about imagery and symbolism. Particularly, I'll be dividing the video again into another thing. Imagery, a different video. Symbolism, a different video. So I'll see you all on the next video. Bye. Oops.